Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the third part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 5, One for All. 10 months, 10 long months since Izumi had accepted to take One for All and started her training. Working hard to clear Takoba Municipal Beach Park and learning how to fight from Sir Night-Eye, all under the watchful and terrifying eye of her mother, Inko. Izumi had been making great progress towards making herself ready to receive One for All, removing the trash from the beach. There were a few hiccups along the way, times when she overexerted herself and collapsed, not helped by her exercising when she wasn't supposed to. Inko had stopped her from most of her unauthorized exercise sessions, but she couldn't stop all of them. She was determined, yes, just a bit too determined. Her combat training was going well, too. Sir Night-Eye had taught her the basics, but he had a few issues with her fighting style. Mainly the fact she was mimicking All Might far too much. While he was impressed that she could replicate his fighting style, it not only didn't suit her but also made it look like she was trying to imitate All Might. So he taught her something more suitable, to incorporate kicks into her combat style. She still had a way to go before she could truly develop her style, but at least now she didn't look like she was imitating All Might. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, All Might and Sir Night-Eye were heading towards Takoba Municipal Beach. Izumi has long since learned their real names. The two wore casual winter clothing as they walked down the path towards the beach. "You're sure it's okay to give it to her on the day of the exam?" Mirai asked as they walked. "Doesn't give her much time to practice using it." "I need to make sure she's strong enough to handle it," Toshinori replied in his deflated form. "Her limbs would explode if she's not strong enough, so I don't want to take any chances with this." "I'm sorry, but I've caused too much harm to her already." Mirai frowned before he fixed his glasses. "Well, she'll have enough time to absorb it properly by the time of the exam. But if she uses it without knowing how to handle it, she could break every bone in her body. You'll have to give her some very good advice on how to handle it." Toshinori nodded. The last thing he wanted was for his successor to break every bone in her body on day one. Recovery Girl would be pissed. Suddenly, the two heard a loud cry. Recognizing it was a human making the noise, the two rushed towards the source, which was the beach. They soon reached the beach and were shocked by what they saw. Izumi was standing atop a small pile of trash that was not on the beach, letting out a loud scream. She had removed her shirt but was wearing a tank top underneath it. Before her was Takoba Municipal Beach, completely clear of trash and junk. And not just the section she was told to clear, but the entire beach. Inko and Durandal were also standing beside the last pile of trash. "Holy cow!" Mirai remarked, shocked by how clean the beach was. "She cleaned the entire beach, even the parts One didn't tell her to clear," Toshinori remarked, shocked that she was able to do all this by herself. "She even cleared the remains of the ship," he added. "Holy, stinking, super crap. Young Izumi," Toshinori said in his muscular form. Izumi panted as she looked down at Toshinori. Smiling, she climbed down from the pile and walked up to him. "I did it." "Indeed you did," Toshinori replied with a large smile. "You've done what I asked for and more. You've cleared the entire beach. Well done," he said as Izumi beamed at the praise. He then got out his phone and showed her a photo of Izumi from 10 months ago. "Here, look at this. This was you 10 months ago. Not the strongest looking person in the world, but look at you now." Izumi looked surprised before she looked to the left, seeing her mother holding a mirror for her. The difference was like night and day. Her skinny body was gone, replaced by one with more muscle mass. Toshinori also noticed that Inko had also lost some weight, not a lot, but it was obvious that she had been exercising as well. "Quite the difference, you see," Toshinori said. "You've improved quite a lot since we first met. Enough to be able to inherit One for All." Izumi smiled at the news. Finally, it was time. 10 months of hard work were finally about to pay off. She would finally get a quirk. To have the power to become a hero. Inko and Durandal walked beside her, all three waiting in anticipation for Toshinori to pass on his quirk. With his signature smile, Toshinori plucked a single strand of hair from his head and held it out in front of him. "Eat this." Any anticipation and awe the three had for this moment was instantly lost, replaced by a mix of shock, surprise, and disgust. "This is how one for all is passed on. By eating a piece of hair," Durandal exclaimed, stating what was on Izumi's and Inko's minds. "My daughter has to eat your hair," Inko said, sounding horrified. "It's the only way to transfer one for all," Mirai said calmly, calming the two women down. "One for all can only be passed on by ingesting the DNA of the previous wielder, and if it's done so willingly. You can't just eat a piece of his hair and expect to receive it. He has to willingly give to you as well." "So, this is the only way then," Izumi said, looking back towards the strand of hair. "It made some sense for it to work like that, as it prevents it from being transferred by accident or to someone who randomly eats his hair." With a sigh, she ate the strand of hair, which instantly became the most disgusting thing she had ever eaten. "So, how long till I start feeling its effects?" "It'll take a while for you to digest the hair fully, but once it's done, you should be able to access the power stored in One for All," Toshinori replied. "And what about advice on how to use it during the entrance exam?" Izumi asked. "Simple. Clench your butt cheeks super tight and scream smash from the bottom of your heart," Toshinori replied with a smile. "That's it," Inko said, sounding annoyed. "That's all the advice you can give her? What about power control? How is she supposed to know how much she can safely use without breaking herself? You told me you'd teach her how to use it safely. How is this supposed to help her?" Toshinori took a step back in fear. "I'm sorry, but, to be frank, when I first received One for All, I could use it at full power. Although, in my case, I was a lot bigger than Izumi at the time. But I'm Sir Dash and was promptly cut off by someone coming out of nowhere and kicking Toshinori square in the face, sending him flying onto his back and making him change into his deflated state. The new arrival landed on the floor, allowing Izumi to get a better look at them. Toshinori attacker was a short, old man with a beard wearing a white and yellow hero costume with a cape. Yet she had no idea who this man was. Whoever he was, he probably knew All Might, if the look of abstract terror on Sir Nightai's face was anything to go by. "Really, Toshinori, that's the best advice you can give your successor," the old man said as Toshinori sat up and looked at the man, looking downright terrified. "And here I thought all those lessons I beat into you stuck." Neither Toshinori nor Mirai spoke, as both men looked too frightened to speak. And since neither of them was willing to say anything, Izumi decided to speak up. "And, who are you?" The old man turned around to face her. "You can call me Gran Torino. I'm Toshinori's old homeroom teacher." "All Might's homeroom teacher?" Izumi said, sounding confused as she processed what she was just told. After a bit, a smile formed on her face. "All Might's homeroom teacher? You taught All Might? Why am I only finding out about this now?" While Izumi looked like someone who had just won the lottery, Toshinori and Mirai looked like they were regretting their life choices. "Mirai, why is he here?" Toshinori asked. "I'm here because I knew you'd mess up your successor's training, just like you messed up your first meeting with her," Gran Torino replied as he turned to face him. "I may be retired, but I pay attention to the news, especially about you, Toshinori. And whilst I admit that you two did a good job preparing her to receive One for All, your explanation on how to use it leaves much to be desired," he said, causing Toshinori to gulp. Finally, someone who agrees with me," Inko said with a smile. "You wouldn't have any advice for my daughter that is better than clench your butt cheeks and scream?" "Let's not jump to conclusions just yet," Gran Torino replied. "Mirai here has yet to contribute yet," he said before turning towards Mirai, who looked terrified. "With good reason." "Well, I was about to suggest you think of One for All like a reservoir held back by a dam. Only letting out small amounts of it at a time," Mirai replied nervously, sounding like he was trying to avoid sharing the same fate at Toshinori. "As well as having it flow over her entire body so that it's not concentrated in one location." Gran Torino looked at Mirai with an unimpressed look before he shrugged. Better than Toshinori's advice, he said before he turned towards Izumi. Did you get that all, kid? Izumi nodded, having written all that info down into one of her notebooks. As well as a few things she could observe about Gran Torino. For an old man, he was fast, and by the looks of things, both Toshinori and Mirai feared him. She also noticed that jets of air shot out of his boots after he hit Toshinori, so it was probably his quirk. Such an ability would give him incredible speed and kicking power and the ability to fly short distances. The air probably came from his lungs, so he'd be limited by dash. Hey, kid. I know you may be interested in my quirk, but don't you have more important things to worry about? Gran Torino asked. Izumi froze before she looked up at him, realizing that she had been muttering again, sorry. Don't worry about it. We all have our hobbies, Gran Torino said, just remember, you've accepted a great responsibility by accepting one for all. Don't abuse it or use it as an excuse to punch the largest thing you see. Right, Toshinori? Toshinori sighed. I'm never going to live that down, aren't I? Gran Torino smirked before turning back to Izumi. You three should be heading off now. All this training would be for nothing if you miss the entrance exam. Right. Izumi said with a nod. Thank you, sir, she said with a bow before she was about to walk off. Oh wait, before I forgot. She said before she rushed over to her bag and got some pieces of paper. She sorted them out before rushing over to Mirai. These are for you. They're about that man who appears to be able to drive people insane. Should help you catch the guy. Mirai could get over his fear of Gran Torino for long enough to take the pages from her and look at them. Ah, thank you. Just in time, too. We were planning to apprehend him today. This should make the arrest easier. You're welcome, Izumi said with a bright smile. I'll see you two after the exam. She said as she rushed back to her bag and shirt, picked them up and rejoined Inko and Durandal, and the three walked off. Toshinori smiled as he watched Izumi walk away, ready to face the UA entrance exam. He was so proud of her. To have come so far under such circumstances was quite impressive. It reminded him an awful lot of his own training, and despite fucking it all up at the start, he was able to help her get through it. Nana would have liked her. His thought processes were interrupted by a large book whacking him on the head. I'm not done with you yet, Toshinori, Gran Torino said, holding said book. I have one more lesson for you, he said as he showed him the book and smiled as a look of horror appeared on Toshinori's face. I'm going to teach you how to be a teacher. Later that day. Izumi stood in awe as she stood at the entrance gate of UA. She never thought this day would come when she could walk the halls of UA. To have a chance to attend this most prestigious school. It was a dream come true. She had already contacted Hitoshi and Nito and wished them both luck. She wondered if she could see them here, but that was unlikely with the thousands of other students here. Hopefully, their training would help them, especially Hitoshi. Hey, Izumi, Durandal said, standing beside her. You aren't going to pass the exam standing around. Izumi looked down at her mechanical companion and nodded. Right, let's go. She said before walking towards UA's entrance, joining hundreds of other students as they approached the school. This was the best day of her life, and nothing could bring it down. Well, save for one thing. Someone bumped into Izumi's shoulder. It was only a light bump, but it was noticeable. She turned towards the person who had just bumped into her and froze, noticing the familiar glare staring back at her. Katsuki, she shivered as Katsuki walked past her, glaring at her for a few seconds before looking ahead of him and walking off towards the entrance. Izumi froze as she watched him walk away, as memories of the past 10 years flooded back to her. Of course, he was here, he wanted to become a hero just as much as she did, and he made it no secret that he would apply here. Izumi had been hoping that she could avoid him here, but it appeared that fate had other ideas. Izumi, Durandal said, bringing her back to reality. I'm going to guess that was Katsuki Bakugo, the boy who bullied you for 10 years? He asked. Izumi nodded, not wanting to go over this right now. She thought she was over this, that thanks to all the therapy, she wouldn't act this way when she saw him again. Hey, you're going to be fine, Durandal said. You're just suffering from slight shock from seeing him again. You haven't seen him for 10 months, after all. It shouldn't happen again, he said as calmly as he could. Okay, Izumi said, a sense of calm flowing over her. Thanks to Durandal's emotional support programs, he always knew what to say to help her. She looked up towards Yue and smiled. Alright, Yue, here I go dash, she said as she walked forward and tripped. She silently apologized to All Might, Sir Night-Eye, and her mother for failing them and making a fool of herself. Freezing up as the ground came closer and closer, only to notice that it wasn't coming any closer. She quickly realized that she had stopped falling mid-fall, but why? Whatever it was, she felt weightless. Are you okay? A cheerful female voice asked to the side of her as she suddenly found herself standing upright. I stopped you with my quirk. I'm sorry I didn't ask first, but I figured you wouldn't mind me catching you. Izumi turned her head towards the voice's source and saw a cute brunette girl with pink cheeks standing beside her. She had a friendly smile on her face. She blushed slightly as she looked at her. Thank you, for that, she said nervously. You're welcome, the girl said as she placed her hands together, and Izumi suddenly felt her weight return to her. Izumi couldn't help but notice the pads on the girl's hands. This is all nerve-wracking, isn't it? Well, I guess I'll see you inside. Bye. She said, giving her a friendly wave before heading towards the school. Izumi watched the girl walk away, the blush still on her face. I finally talked to a girl. Wait. What do you mean, I finally talked to a girl? You are a girl. Durandal asked, sounding confused. I know that, but, Izumi said as her blush got slightly brighter. Apart from my mother, I've never spoken to another girl before. What? Durandal said, sounding surprised. But, you've changed with other girls before. Surely you spoke with them? Izumi shook her head. No, I just got changed quietly. I've only ever spoken to boys. Wait. Are you telling me you've never spoken to a member of the same sex? Holy crap. What the hell did Katsuki do to you? I asked him out, Izumi replied quietly. Oh, Durandal said, realizing exactly what had happened. And he didn't take it too well, didn't he? He asked, getting a nod from Izumi. And he wasn't the only one. And they all responded the same way. Shit. Why didn't you bring this up with Isa? He could have helped you with this. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to bring it up, Izumi said, sounding ashamed. It's just that, I was scared of where that conversation would lead. Durandal looked at her with red eyes. If he could, he would have had a concerned look on his face. Thanks to his advanced processors, he was quickly able to deduce what she was worried about. She was bi, and after being rejected by so many boys, she was afraid of the same thing happening to any girl she was interested in, so she kept her distance and never told anyone about it, not even her parents. Hey, Izumi. I know you're worried about this, but it's fine. I'm sure that your parents will accept whatever sexual orientation you may have. But you can worry about it later. Right now, you have a written and practical exam to pass. So, let's focus on getting you into UA and on course to become a hero. Izumi looked at Durandal and nodded. She spent the past 10 months training for this day, and she could ill afford to waste it worrying about her sexual orientation. Even if it worried her, it was something she could deal with later. Right now, she wasn't going to put all that hard effort to waste. She had an exam to pass and was going to give it her all. She rushed towards the school and made her way towards the examination room, Durandal beside her. Some more time later. The exam went well, as far as Izumi could tell. Durandal wasn't allowed near her whilst she was taking the exam, but thanks to being registered as an emotional support animal, he was allowed to wait close by, just to keep an eye on her. After the exam, they had a half-hour break for lunch before the briefing for the practical part of the exam. Since she had a big breakfast, which included a strand of All Might's hair, Izumi only had a small lunch. She had a good reason to. She needed to see if she could use one for all before the practical exam. Thankfully, Durandal had something to help with that. "You sure this will work?" Izumi asked as the two found a secluded spot and sat down. "I'm sure," Durandal replied. "When in armored wolf mode, I can monitor your vitals. It's possible that I can use that function to monitor your activation of One for All. But you have to be wearing me first. Time is of the essence, so we don't have time to remove your skirt." "Right," Izumi said with a nod. She hadn't used Durandal's armored wolf form much, only a few times to show to her mother, All Might and Sir Night-Eye. She never actually practiced fighting in that mode. Well, at least she wouldn't have to fight in it. "Activate armored wolf mode," she said after tying her fluffy hair into a ponytail. Durandal complied as he got up, splinting open and reconnoitering himself so that he could form a suit of armor around her, her hair poking out of the back. "Alright, I'm monitoring your vitals dash, holy cow." "What is it?" Izumi asked, sounding concerned. Well, I can tell you have a quirk now. As well as see just how much power is stored inside of it, Durandal replied, and a display appeared on her HUD. "Good lord. I can see why All Might wanted you to bulk up. There is a lot of energy stored inside One for All. Jesus, it's like you've got a fusion reactor inside of you. I am glad One for All is a stockpile quirk. I dread to think what Paxton would have done with this much power." Izumi nodded nervously, sharing Durandal's dread. "Well, at least he can't get his hands on it anymore. So, now that we know how much power I have, how do I access it?" "Sir Night-Eye only told me how to portion off a small amount of it, not how to use it in the first place." "Well, all I can do is suggest that you breathe, loosen up a bit, and try and call upon One for All," Durandal said calmly. "I'll be monitoring you to see if anything happens, so I'll notify you if anything happens." "Okay," Izumi said before she closed her eyes and breathed, calming her mind as she tried to call upon One for All. Not easy when you've never had a quirk before, but it was better to try and activate it now and find out how much you could use now, than later during the exam itself. Her eyes suddenly shot open as she felt something pulse across her body. "Wow. Well, that happened," Durandal remarked, sounding surprised. "I take it I just activated One for All?" Izumi asked. "By the looks of it, yes," Durandal replied. "Try doing it again." With a nod, Izumi tried to recreate the pulse, succeeding several times before holding it. She could feel the power contained within One for All, like a great ocean filled with power. She felt that she could drown in it, succumbing to its power and breaking herself with it if she wasn't careful. She could see why Sir Night-Eye recommended she think of it like a dam, holding the energy back and letting only a small amount out. If she flooded her body with that much power, she risked killing herself with it. She closed her eyes and imagined a great dam holding back the energy held within One for All. She then imagined lowering the floodgates just enough for 1% of One for All to pass through. With that 1%, she imagined it coursing through her body. "Izumi, I don't wish to worry you, but there's currently green lightning arcing around your body, and your veins are glowing red," Durandal remarked, sounding worried. Izumi quickly opened her eyes and looked at her body. There was indeed green lightning arcing around her body, but thanks to wearing Durandal, she couldn't see her skin. Durandal realized this and brought up another screen on her HUD, showing a reflection of her face, seeing a glowing red X on her face. It was the same all across her body. This must be One for All. It's functioning differently than it did for All Might, but I guess it operates differently depending on the user. Looks like it, Durandal observed. Try and see if you can move. It'll be pointless if you can move with it active. Izumi nodded before she moved her arms and legs, walking around for a bit. She felt fine. Okay, I can move. Good. Now let's try dash, she said before she was cut off by a voice over the intercom asking for all exam attendees to head to the lecture hall. Oh no, I lost track of time. Deactivate armored wolf mode. Durandal complied as his armored form detached from her body and reformed into his wolf form. Looks like you'll be stuck with 1% during the exam, he remarked as the two started to make their way towards the lecture hall. Don't worry, now you can control it. We can find out your limits later. 1% should be enough to get by for now. I hope so, Izumi said calmly. Even if she could only use 1%, it was still better than nothing. She smiled as they made their way towards the lecture hall, ready to face the practical exam. A good half a minute after Izumi and Durandal left the area, a figure appeared leaning against a wall, close to where the two had previously been standing. Deactivating a cloaking field as she stood up. She wore a simple dark bodysuit with two plates underneath her chest and light boots. She had a belt around her waist and a mask covering her face. Well, I see what Toshinori meant by she's a fast learner, the woman remarked before she reactivated her cloaking field and vanished. Sometime later. The introduction to the practical exam went well, for the most part. Seeing President Mike in person was awesome, but his attempts to rally excitement out of the students there fell flat. And whilst a boy with blue hair and glasses called her out for her mumbling, the teachers managed to get him to calm down a bit. The practical exam itself was, as expected, against robots. Paxton's robots. Despite only showing a black silhouette, thanks to all the research she did into the man, she was able to recognize them. One pointer was his basic Strider robots, human-sized machines that either used particle guns or blades. The 2 pointers were his Minotaur robots, larger machines that carried heavier weapons. The 3 pointers were his tripod walkers, large mech-sized machines with particle cannons and missiles. And then there were the 0 pointers, the Titans. Massive 6-legged walkers with a humanoid upper torso but lack a head and have 4 large arms. Those things could easily destroy a city and have done so before. At least she knows what they'll be getting into with those. When the presentation finished, President Mike asked if anyone had any questions. Izumi's hand immediately went up. What are the limitations on support equipment, robot assistance, and strength-enhancing equipment such as powered exoskeletons? She had asked. Since Durandal covered all 3 of those things, she wanted to be sure if she could bring him along. Good question, President Mike had replied. There is no limit on what support equipment you can bring in. This includes an armored suit and powered exoskeletons. Robot assistants, on the other hand, are a lot more restricted. Fully autonomous robots that can act independently of their owner are not allowed to participate in the exam. Only machines that are controlled directly by the participant with some form of controller are allowed in. Izumi nodded as she sat back down. Looks like she would be using Durandal's armored wolf mode for the practical exam since he is a fully autonomous robot and wouldn't be allowed to operate independently during the exam. Good thing she registered him as support equipment. This worried her slightly, as this would be the very first time she fought something in that mode, and they still didn't know much about it. She had coincided with going without him but had rejected it the moment she saw Katsuki getting into the same testing area she was going to. She initially wondered why that was the case but then remembered that students from the same school were being put into different testing grounds. And she didn't go to the same school as him anymore. It didn't help that it meant that Hitoshi and Nito were also going to different testing grounds so they couldn't help each other. That is probably the reason why they were splitting them up. Also, participants were required to put on their support equipment before getting onto the bus, so there she was, sitting in the bus with Durandal covering her in armored wolf mode. The top half of his head retracted back so her face was visible. Getting mixed looks from everyone else on the bus. If there was one thing that was making her feel better was that the nice girl from before was on the bus as well. I don't think this was a good idea, she murmured, feeling very nervous and shivering. Believe me, wearing me is better than me not accompanying you into the exam, Durandal replied, keeping his voice low so that only Izumi could hear him. You only have access to 1% of one for all. Maybe a bit more, thanks to the actuators fitted into me, which are boosting your physical strength and speed. Unfortunately, we have zero training in this mode, and fighting in armor is a lot different from fighting outside of it. I've reduced the strength of the actuators so you don't accidentally hurt yourself, and increased power to the compressors to reduce kickback and ease the stress on your body. Should stop you from breaking yourself. Izumi nodded before she focused on trying to calm her nerves. Not easy when you're on the same bus as someone who bullied you for 10 years, as well as having what felt like everyone looking at you. Okay, just breathe in and breathe out. Breath in, breath dash. Excuse me. A voice said to her side rather loudly, causing her to let out a panicked yelp and fall off her seat. Durandal instinctively lowered the helmet so that it covered her face, just in case. Oh go dash, I'm so sorry about that, the voice said apologetically. Izumi noticed someone was crouching down beside her. Looking up, she saw the blue-haired boy from before who had called her out. Who Durandal had said had a stick up his arse. My apologies, I didn't mean to scare you there. It's okay, Izumi said, breathing heavily as Durandal lifted back the top of his head again. That didn't do her nerves any good /JJ just very nervous right now. Hey blue hair, Durandal added. Next time you want to talk to someone, make sure they're not trying to calm themselves down due to stress. It's not very heroic and could sabotage them. The blue-haired boy was silent for a moment before bowed sharply. My apologies. It was not my intention to sabotage you. I suppose my own nerves are getting the better of me, and are causing me not to notice things that should be obvious, such as your nervous state. Still, that is a poor excuse on my part, and I apologize for any distress I may have caused you. That's okay, Izumi said, still somewhat unnerved. Everyone handles stress differently. Indeed, the boy said. Well, I wish you luck during the exam, he said before he walked back to his seat and sat back down. Well, at least he knows when he's in the wrong, Durandal remarked quietly. Still has a stick up his arse though. Izumi didn't respond. She just sat there breathing in and out slowly, trying to calm herself down as the bus came to a stop. She stood up as people started to file out, walking away from the bus and crowding around the entrance to the testing site. Once again, she saw Katsuki in the crowd but couldn't see the nice girl from earlier. Hey, a familiar voice said softly beside her. She turned her head to see the nice girl from earlier standing beside her, looking at her with a worried expression on her face. Are you okay? I saw you freak out on the bus and wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, Izumi replied. Just rather stressed out, that's all. Yeah, I'm guessing most of us are a bit stressed out, the girl said. Where's the robot dog you were with earlier? I'm wearing him, Izumi replied, pointing at the armor she was wearing, followed by Durandal adding a yo. The girl looked at her with a rather confused look on her face. You have a shifter robot? I thought such robots were exclusively used on the moon. Is that what this kind of robot is called? Izumi asked, never realizing that there was a designation for such a robot. The girl's reply was cut off by the voice of Present Mike yelling out, and, start. Talk later, exam now. Durandal said as he lowered Izumi's helmet to cover her head fully. Sorry, we'll talk later, Izumi said apologetically as she rushed off with the rest of the students, the nice girl quickly following behind. As she ran, she powered up One for All at 1%, combined with the enhancements thanks to wearing Durandal, which allowed her to overtake the others. The students quickly spread out across the grounds, searching the area for robots to destroy. Izumi was among the first to find a group of 3 one-pointer/strider with blades on each arm. She charged towards the robot and clenched her fist before smashing it into its chest. It promptly crumpled like it was made of cardboard. Looks like these things are designed to be destroyed, Durandal remarked as Izumi destroyed the other 2 machines. Paxton would never allow machines this fragile to see the light of day. Izumi nodded as she rushed towards the next robot. She could do this, even with 1% she could still win. All she needed to do was destroy enough robots. Durandal seemed happy to smash up many of Paxton's machines, even if they were inferior copies. The next 10 minutes were a blur of activity, running about destroying robots and helping out other examens who were in trouble. She wasn't going just to stand by and watch someone get hurt after all. Even if it did hurt her chances. Even so, she was doing well. Her train of thought was suddenly cut off when she heard a loud scream. Turning around, she saw another girl get slammed into a wall, whilst a nearby three-pointer got destroyed by another examinee. She quickly rushed over to the girl's side and crouched down beside her. "Are you okay?" The girl let out a cry of pain as she griped her right leg, which was twisted and bent in ways it shouldn't be. "No, I think it's broken," she replied through gritted teeth. The girl looked up at her, and Izumi was almost surprised by her golden yellow cat-like eyes. She recognized them. It was the girl who was also seeing ISA, who she allowed to go ahead of her. She couldn't remember her name, but the eyes were distinct enough to remember them. Guess she wanted to become a hero, too. "Izumi, I know this might heavily damage your chances, but we can't leave her here," Durandal said. "Don't worry, I wasn't going to," Izumi said before she helped the girl up and carried her off in a fireman carry. "Why are you helping me?" the girl asked, looking rather surprised that Izumi was helping her. "What about the exam? I'm not leaving you out here." "It's far too dangerous," Izumi replied as she carried the cat-eyed girl. "You could easily get caught up in something." "What happened anyway?" "I was kicking a three-pointer when its missile rack exploded on me and sent me flying," the cat-eyed girl replied. "It wasn't even the part 1 hit." "Yeah, we've been seeing that a lot," Durandal remarked. "A lot of the three-pointers we have encountered either had destroyed missile racks or had them explode for no apparent reason. Guess the batch of missiles they're using are defective." "Looks like UA is going to have some words with the manufacturer after this," Izumi remarked before the ground shuddered, and there was the sound of something very large coming their way. Izumi quickly turned around to see the massive form of a zero-pointer smashing through one of the buildings, shaking the earth with each step. She had seen these robots before, but they were so much larger in person and scarier. Izumi didn't say a word as she turned to run, doing what all the other students were doing. Only to stop when she heard someone cry out for help. She turned around and saw the nice girl from earlier, her ankle trapped underneath some rubble as the zero-pointer rapidly approached her. And no one was turning back to help her. She would have rushed off to help her, but she was already carrying someone, and she couldn't risk putting them in danger as well. She couldn't help her. "Put me down," the cat-eyed girl she was carrying said. "What?" Izumi asked, sounding confused. "I'll be fine. I've had worse," the girl said calmly. "But you can't help that other girl whilst carrying me. So put me down and go help her." Izumi's heart sank when the girl said that she's had worse, but quickly complied. "I'll come back for you," she said before she rushed towards the zero-pointer. As she ran, her mind raced as she tried to devise a way to save the nice girl. She couldn't dig her out as the robot was too close, and pulling her out could risk causing more harm to her. She then remembered how All Might took out these things, jumping up and smashing them in the chest. Normally the rear legs would be able to keep them upright, but when punched by All Might, the rear legs crumpled. In her mind, she opened the floodgates holding the full power of One for All back and poured it into her legs as she leapt into the air. Then, she poured it into her right arm and with a loud smash, punched the zero-pointer with everything she had. The massive robot recoiled back from the punch, its rear legs breaking up as it fell. She smiled as she realized her plan had succeeded, only to be replaced by a look of horror when she realized how high up she was, that her legs and right arm were broken, and that she was falling. Her body seized up as she fell, unable to move or think. Her mind reverted to 10 months ago, to the building she had met All Might on, the one she jumped off of. She messed up. She messed up big time. All that training, all the planning, the work she put into getting here, only for it to be wasted by meeting the same fate she avoided 10 months ago. She couldn't die, not now, but there was nothing she could do to prevent it, only stare as the ground came ever closer. "Izumi!" Durandal shouted, bringing her back to reality. She blinked a few times as, strangely, she could see Durandal's face in front of her. Izumi, are you alright? WWW what? Izumi asked, looking around with horrified and confused eyes. She was no longer falling. Instead, she was lying on the ground, completely fine. What happened? She asked weakly. That girl with the gravity manipulation quirk from earlier used it on you again, Durandal replied calmly. Stopped you just before you hit the ground. Best guess is that you went into shock due to the fall. Going to have to bring that up during your next therapy session. Also, Recovery Girl healed you. Recovery Girl, Izumi said shakily, still finding it hard to believe she survived. She looked to Durandal's side, seeing the short form of the youthful heroine, Recovery Girl, standing beside him. Don't you worry, I've already healed you, and Durandal informed me of how it happened, Recovery Girl said. Still, I'm surprised you're still conscious after that. With wounds like yours, you should have passed out when I used my quirk. I think it might have something to do with Izumi's quirk still being active, Durandal remarked. Izumi's eyes widened in surprise as she slowly raised her hand, noticing the lightning in glowing veins. She didn't even realize she had one for all still coursing through her. She closed her eyes as she deactivated one for all, opening them and standing back up. I suggest you take these, Recovery Girl said, passing Izumi some gummy bears. These will help with the fatigue. Just don't eat them all at once, she said before she patted Durandal's head with a bare hand. I must admit, you have quite the loyal and useful companion here. I just wish my last dog was as loyal as him. Well, take care now, she said before she walked off. Izumi watched Recovery Girl leave, still feeling very shaken up. Looks like she wasn't as close to recovering as she first thought. There was still lingering trauma from when she jumped, resulting in her getting a new fear. A fear of heights. She wondered why it took so long to find out about it, but she guessed it was because she had never been anywhere so high. Hey, the voice of the nice girl said gently beside her. Are you okay? Izumi looked to her side, tears forming in her eyes as she saw the girl who had saved her, a worried expression on the girl's face. Without thinking, she rushed forwards to hug the girl tightly. Thank you, she cried as tears fell from her eyes. The nice girl stood there with a surprised look, which quickly shifted to a worried look. She knew the girl was nervous, but didn't think it was this bad. What had happened to this girl to make her so fragile? You're welcome, the nice girl said, as gently as possible. It was clear that the fall had traumatized her greatly, but she refused to go into it, as now was not the time to ask. Izumi, Durandal said as he walked up beside them. I've called your mother and told her what happened, she's on her way to pick you up. I think it's better if you don't walk home. Izumi nodded but held onto the hug for a few more moments before she broke off. Sorry about that, she said nervously, shaking as she did. It's okay, the nice girl replied. You needed it. Hey, you are, if it's alright, can I stay with you for a bit, just till your mother gets here? You look like you could do with someone to talk to for a bit. Izumi's eyes widened in surprise. You would do that for me? The nice girl nodded. You saved me from that zero-pointer, and the entire thing left you shaken. So it's only fair that I stick around for a bit, just to make sure you are okay. More tears started to fall from Izumi's eyes. Thank you, she said before the three started to walk off. Oh, I never got your name. Oh, right. It's Achiko Uraraka, the nice girl replied with a kind and friendly smile. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 4. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.